All right. We are joined by Grant County historian Bill Munn, who's ready for moments in Grant County history. Turn the shirt down, Bill, just a little bit, and then we can get started.
Well, this is maybe the last rose or the last hibiscus of summer, I guess. I was talking with Ed earlier that this morning is a classic Michigan morning. A summer day
yeah.
in up around Traverse City, and
Mm-hmm.
although if we're up there now, we get a little bit of fall, I believe. That comes early.
It does.
Comes early up there. So, anyways, some of your listeners, I'm sure, will remember a local newspaper man by the name of Paul Hilsheimer. Paul Hilsheimer, for a number of years, was the owner, I believe, and publisher of the News Herald, which is still
being published.
Still being published. Paul, it was, as I believe, a weekly paper, and is still weekly, I believe, or monthly maybe.
Well, it's kind of periodically.
but at any bit, a few years back, when the Community History Project had a grant, one of the things that we did was we were attempting to put together a complete record, or as complete record as we could, of Grant County newspapers on microfilm. And as so a lot of the material that I used and students have used comes from the Chronicle and the Marion Leader Tribune. At one point, I think at the turn of the century, there were 4 newspapers in Marion, sporadically at different times, most of which are on microfilm at the Marion Public Library. So it's a really valuable source. I did find some issues, and Paul's daughter, Retta Gunyon, was very generous in providing a few copies that were left over. You know, they tore the building down that the News Herald and Farm News they worked out of downtown, and Phil Sisson managed to rescue the Farm News, which was in the basement as the building came down, and Phil managed to get down in there and pull those out, and those are all on microfilm at the public library. Very interesting read.
That building was between 4th and 5th on Adams Streets.
Right across from Signature
West side
Dance,
of the street.
right across from Signature Dance Studio, and
Yeah.
one way, and the county complex on the other.
Right.
But in the materials that Retta and her sister Rosie shared with me was a story that Paul Hilsheimer published in 1951 in the News Herald. Now, before I started this, this is a story, all right. Some of which can be verified, some of which cannot be. So I'm gonna put that out at the. Well, I can't say it cannot be. I wasn't able to. All right, but there's some interesting stuff in here. So this is a 2-parter, by the way. So I'll share the intro today, and then we'll finish up the story next week. But Hilsheimer starts off by discussing an episode involving John Ratliff. Now, this part of the story can be verified. That Ratliff was very active in the Underground Railroad, was a Quaker, and really was a major figure in the Underground Railroad. He also was a former county superintendent of schools, a resident of Franklin Township, and really a very important man in the pioneer community of Grant County. And as a devout Quaker, was opposed to slavery, and again he participated in actually escorting escaped slaves, fugitives, through Grant County, offering food and shelter, and then transportation to Wabash and Huntington County. I have found the next stop up was at Mount Etna, and then once you got past Wabash, you were kind of on your own, because there were very few Quakers north of Wabash. And, you know, this activity was illegal. And so once Ratliff would get past Wabash, it was a pretty straight shot up to Michigan, Cassopolis in that area up there where there was another Quaker community. But he relates a story which is related in Whitson about a slave owner and a slave catcher who were very much around looking for their property, encountering Ratliff in Michigan, and apparently, and it's a little strange, but apparently in an attempt to expose Ratliff as a agent in the Underground Railroad, which by the way was not popular in most places in the North either. All right, told Ratliff that that they wouldn't arrest him and the woman if they paraded the woman and her baby through the streets of town, through the main streets of town. And Ratliff said, "This I gladly did." Now this part I can feature from what I've read about Ratliff, and I think this is pretty well verified. I've seen some other accounts corroborating this, but he points out that there was a little bit more to the story of Ratliff and the Underground Railroad. After his Michigan experience, it's recorded, one afternoon late, I put 9 or 10 people, escaped slaves, in my wagon, covered them with my hay, and placed a few sticks of furniture, and started for Wabash County. When I was driving along now what is called Wabash Pike, about 2 miles out of Marion, I was overtaken by a real handsome young man. His dress and manner of speech told me he was from the South. He rode along beside me, and his conversation was so pleasant that I said to myself, "Caught again." And the poor people under the hay were more frightened than I was. They could hear him, and they too knew he was from the South. I was expecting him to stop at any moment for a search, but when we got to the old Peru road, he turned off with a most polite wish for a pleasant journey and rode away. His wonderful mount and stately way that stately way he rode, I was more than admiring him. He started whistling, and I think he imitated every bird I had ever heard. Now, who was this brilliant young Southerner riding the dusty Hoosier roads on a magnificent horse in the years just preceding the Civil War? A man so handsome, so gifted, so striking in appearance that John Ratliff, a conservative Hoosier Quaker, found it hard to take in, but remembered him as clearly as that morning at sunrise 56 years before, and this was in 1913. So, we're going to find out who the handsome stranger was
Next week.
next week, so stay tuned. We have no code rings to dispense. Orphan Annie, decoder rings.
But you send in 250 box tops, and we'll send you the answer.
Or as the car guy says, send me a 1956 Thunderbird, fully detailed, and I'll be glad to furnish you with